Soos u sal sien, my oogmerk hier is om 'n beskrywende kaart van die doelwitte van onderrig, of liewer onderwys, uit te beeld, en ek het 'n hele nuwe model geskep hiervoor. En my groot uitdaging is om hierdie op Afrikaans te doen. Ek gaan nou met u die hele paadjie deurstap, en ek sal redelik vinnig deurstap, so hopelik sal dit redelik duidelik nog steeds bly, omdat ek nou 'n bietjie vinniger gaan. Ek gaan dit eers op Engels doen, en dan kom ons bietjie terug en bekyk die Afrikaans dan, om te sien hoe ek die terminologie op Afrikaans hanteer, en ek sou enige voorstelle vir terminologie geweldig waardeer. En natuurlik andersins ook kommentaar rondom die model self. My nadeel natuurlik is, ek is as voorgraadse student oor na Amerika toe en het dus op Engels grotendeels my werk gedoen, uitsluitlik my werk gedoen. Dus vind ek dat ek nou my verwysingsraamwerk hier op Engels gehad het. En dis my geweldig interessant om dit nou weer op Afrikaans te doen, want op sekere maniere is Afrikaans my baie beskrywend, maar daar is ook hier en daar dinge wat op Engels beter uitgebeeld is, en dus moet ek nou mooi versigtig trap in Afrikaans. So, kom ons loop die paadjie gou. So wat ek hier nou voorstel is, ek wil nou juist 'n beskrywende kaart doen, en dan gee ek 'n paar voorbeelde hiervan. So ek gaan op Engels oorslaan om hierdie gedeelte op Engels te doen, en dan kom ons terug en dan doen ons die gedeelte op Afrikaans om dan te sien hoe goed my terminologie is, en soos ek sê, sal enige terugvoer waardeer. So a descriptive map of education, and my examples would be the periodic table, kingdom animalia, languages, geography, electromagnetic waves, and so you see with a descriptive map you can zoom in on specifics and zoom out and see the bigger picture because it is a map, and maps do very well with zooming. So let's now take a look at the model that I'm introducing, and that is the GILL model. So here we go. The parts are represented as follows: F for fundamentals, instructions, teachings, and leadership. And now we will explore the different parts. But maybe to start it out, I'll give you a sense for what each part focuses on. The F, or the fundamentals, focuses on automated skills. Instructions on reflected skills. The teachings part focuses on judgment and commitment. And the leadership, self-assertive and inventive. So let's fire away. So we'll take a look and we'll go through fundamentals. You'll see here on the left will be kind of a little menu that will drop down, and with each topic being introduced, we will then address it in a bigger whole. So firstly, the focus is, as you see there, it is fact-centered. Then the expectations in this fact-centered environment of fundamentals is proof of contextualized, automated performance. Now, this is an essential part to education. Automated performance and contextualized automated performance. So let's take counting as an example. A child does not start with automated performance. And once the automated performance is in place, you obviously want to expand that to contextualized automated performance, to meaning reflecting true understanding of what is being done. So the focus here, the culmination, is automaticity, that you can do it without hesitation. And thus, a trainer is focused to help you. The leader in this environment is a trainer, and it's automated knowing and doing is the focus. So let's take some examples then. In speech, we obviously create fluid speech, and we know all the parts of speech that have to fall in place, and do so in a very fluid way. So when you mess with that, like when you've got damage to Broca's area of the brain, you definitely see an immediate impact in this fundamental not being functional anymore. Math facts, spelling, some people want to know the details and have an automated way of reflecting on that. News, weather, trivia, and I also use booting up in the morning. very interesting. As we wake up in the morning, you know who you are, you know where you are, you know the time and the day, roughly. Now, the moment if you've ever woken up and you have no clue where you are or what day it is and so forth, you know what an agony that is, and you keep focusing on that until that is known. So our brain keeps that in memory, so that even after a deep sleep you wake up and you are still contextualized. And when not, we understand that that has to happen. The soul yearns for that. So education really has to have that focus on fundamentals, and that has to be in place, and thus we have to explore which areas are befitting to be fundamentals and how do we address them. So you start with something that's unconscious, then it becomes conscious, then you become able, and then automated. Fitz and Posner said the cognitive, the associative, and the automated is how they worded it. Know it not, know it by recognition, know it by production, and know it by habit. So now we move on to instructions. Instructions is objective-centered. So fundamentals were fact-centered, now instructions objective-centered. You've got an objective that you're trying to achieve. So once you've achieved it, the expectation is that you'll have proof of contextualized, reflected problem-solving skills. In other words, you understand the richness. You need your fundamentals in place, obviously. If you do not have them, you cannot function well in an instructional environment. You do need the fundamentals as the base. And thus, you have reflection that is there in problem-solving skills. And so when you reach that as a culmination, expertise is what you're after. And so an instructor tries to focus on reflected knowing and doing. And examples would be in tennis. You just want to get it over the net. Then you want to get your serve in the opposing quadrant. And then you want to get it with speed in the exact area in that quadrant. And so you see many parts being automated, and then the reflection is there to strategically place the ball. And this, obviously, I'm using a motor skill here, but it affects us in many areas. And so here's some examples in speaking and writing where you have sounds, and let's take the speaking. You start with sounds, just babble, then you form words, the phrases, the sentences, paragraphs, discourse development, and then creative and technical speech as we reach higher levels of functionality in speaking, and the same then goes for writing as indicated there. So let's take a look then at teachings. Now, teachings are human-centered. An interesting fact here is we noticed that in both fundamentals and instructions we had proof of, and now we've got evidence of. So a bit of a difference here, of course, is proof, that you can prove it without any doubt. Evidence is obviously a strong indication, but not an outright fact. For example, I can tell you, are you honest? And you might say yes, and I say, prove it. Well, that you can't prove it. How can you prove it? There's simply evidence that you are. So that difference between proof and evidence is very essential, and the Afrikaans is a little more tricky there, but so I'd like to see your feedback when we get to that situation. So now I'm using a word that is really, really controversial, and I'm using it because I've just not found anything better, and that is the culmination in this area. When you have, now I need to focus on the description here. There's evidence of a commitment to contextualized judgment and principles of charity and justice. Now I want to focus on that charity and justice. I find most people tend to gravitate towards justice. Now justice can be harsh. Justice can be unkind. Justice does not have to have any mercy to it. That's not its job. Justice has to be just. Whereas charity and concepts like mercy have a very important component as well in being human-centered. It's not just justice that matters when we are human-centered. But justice and charity have to live together as a yin-yang complement. And so I know in Catholicism the word saint is really very much fixed in a religious context. Yet if you look in the dictionary, a saint is also a very good person. And thus sainthood is that striving towards a very high level of goodness and righteousness, of justice, of charity. As we are human-centered, as I say, that's the culmination of how can we be most human-centered. And that commitment to, why I say contextualized judgment, is obviously wanting to understand as best and as fully as possible. That's the focus with the contextualized judgment. And the principles of charity and justice of what we live in our. So let's take it one step further then. So this is an area to reflect. Is there a word that would capture that concept of sainthood? I feel sainthood does it. But obviously because of the baggage that the term might have, like the word communism has baggage, yet before communism the word had a sense of commonality and of togetherness and in each other's favor and so forth. But that's now lost to a political concept of and use of the word. So can this word of sainthood survive as is, or is there a better word? And so a teacher, the focus here is a teacher, it's principled, knowing, doing, and being. So it gives us that concept now that's added of being. And being is an analog concept, it's not a binary concept. And because it's analog, evidence is more appropriate, whereas when it's binary, the more binary it is, the more proof is available. So let me see so here I give you examples of this, of physical and spiritual, emotional and rational, others and self, all these areas that have to balance each other and to follow, to create that ideal in living up to teachings. Just a comment here, if I say the teachings of Christ, we can relate to it, but when I say the instructions of Christ, we immediately realize there is a big difference between teachings and instructions. Thus, the necessity to split it. Yet when you say a teacher or instructor, we do not focus as much on the difference there. So, this is also a great saying. And because we know more about time and history than any men before us, we fallaciously equate ethical advance with scientific progress in a point-to-point relationship. I think it's a very good line, and thus the focus here, why teachings are so very important, because our scientific progress really focus more on instructions, and thus the teaching side is now a really evident model. So I'm bringing it together now and adding the final piece, and that is the L of the fiddle model. So I'm going to start here and use the mouse to indicate this. Fundamentals, the focus is automaticity. Instructions, the focus is expertise. Teachings, the focus is sainthood. Fundamentals is fact-centered. Instructions, objective-centered. And teachings, human-centered. You want to have, with fundamentals, proof of contextualized automated performance. Instructions, proof of contextualized reflected problem-solving skills. And teachings, evidence of a commitment to contextualized judgment and the principles of charity and justice. So these come together, and thus the crowning jewel here is, and all these build very well on each other, is then self-assertive, to be self-assertive and inventive. This is a sense, I'll read this little description below here. Proactive inner awareness, confidence of human potential, visionary ownership in thinking and doing. Thus, in an exemplary way, being proactive and taking ownership of our thinking and doing, and thus a very strong path to leadership. So, once again, I've just recapped it for you, so I'll go through these really quickly. and thus the model now just the other way around, with leadership at the top. So now let's go to the Afrikaans model, and then you can give me some idea of, if you like the terminology I use. So, 'n beskrywende kaart van die doelwitte van onderwys. Die bekendstelling is die GILL Model. So, dit natuurlik staan vir die grondslag, fundamentals, instruksies, leringe en leierskap. Die fokus dus vir die grondslag is geautomatiseerde vaardighede. Die instruksiegedeelte is gereflekteerde vaardighede. Die leringe is oordeel en verbintenis. En dan die leierskap is selfverwesenliking en om skepend te wees. So kom ons kyk nou mooi na die drie. Die grondslag, daar het jy 'n bewys van gekontekstualiseerde refleksprestasie. Dis feitegerig. Soos ek genoem het, fact-centered, feitegerig. Dan daar is 'n bewys van gekontekstualiseerde, geautomatiseerde prestasie. Dit is die verwagting wat mens daar het. En as mens kyk na die hoogtepunt is outomatisasie. Dis juis waarna mens streef hierso is, sonder om te hoef na te dink te kan produseer. En 'n afrigter is gefokus op geautomatiseerde kennis en aksies. Voorbeelde, soos ek genoem het op Engels, is in spraak, brakkese gebied, area, wiskunde, feite, spelling, nuus, weer, trivia, wakker word, routine, ensovoorts. En dan weer eens, onbewus tot bewus, tot vaardig, tot geautomatiseerd, kognitief, assosiatief en geautomatiseerd. Weet dit nie, weet deur herkenning, weet deur produksie, weet dit deur gewoonte. En nou kom ons by instruksie. Instruksie is doelgerig. En daar is 'n bewys, weer eens, soos by die grondslaggedeelte, is daar 'n bewys van gekontekstualiseerde, gereflekteerde probleemoplossingsvaardighede. Problem solving skills, probleemoplossingsvaardighede. En die fokus natuurlik hier is kundigheid. En die persoon is 'n instrukteur, gereflekteerde kennis en aksies, is waarna ons in die gebied streef. En die voorbeeld weer eens, soos ek genoem het, tennis, en daar kan ons nog daai woordjies verder vertaal, kognitief en so aan. Sal dit nog moet doen, en hier moet ek ook nog 'n bietjie vertaling bybring, vir instruksies in die voorbeeld. So nou bring ons tot leringe. Leringe is mensgerig. So feitegerig, doelgerig en mensgerig. En 'n substantiëre getuienis van 'n verbintenis tot gekontekstualiseerde oordeel en beginsels van naaste liefde en geregtigheid. So hier is juis waar ek nou wil hoor of hoe u voel oor my kontras tussen bewys en getuienis. So daar's getuienis van die dinge, as mens die woord bewys gebruik, het mens natuurlik probleme met die verskil tussen proof en evidence. So daar sal ek graag van u wil hoor. En dan, nou, hier is die ding, is sainthood op Afrikaans. So, ek wil nog steeds die woord hier bespreek van heiligheid. Miskien is heiligheid 'n goeie woord, of geheilig. Hier moet 'n mens bietjie dink. Maar, so ek sê, dis nie noodwendig dat ek 'n religieuse benadering het nie. En dus vra ek myself af, kan iets heilig wees vir mense buite die konteks van godsdiens? Na my mening ja. En dit is iets wat geweldig dierbaar, teer, respekvol, en so is wat mens graag wil beskerm, versterk en veredel. Dit is wanneer iets vir jou heilig is. En dus is daar die groot fokus op met 'n mensgerigtheid, dat daai geheiligheid wat daar is juist dan 'n fokus, as mens daai heilige eerbied vir die mens het, is daar dan die beginsels van geregtigheid en naaste liefde wat saamleef. En weer eens daai gekontekstualiseerde oordeel, en dit is nie 'n eensydige oordeel nie, maar die groter geheel word noukeurig in ag geneem voor oordeel gevel word. So, dan 'n onderwyser, beginselvaste kennis, aksies en 'n wese. Daai being, wat ek vertaal as wese. So, strewe na heiliging, beginsels van naaste liefde en geregtigheid, 'n getransformeerde wese, oordeelkundig in konteks, met die fokus op liefde, lojaliteit, integriteit, beginselvas, morele waardes ensovoorts. En so hier is my vertaling van Warren Eiseley se gesegde, en omdat ons meer weet oor tyd en geskiedenis as enige geslag voor ons, stel ons 'n misleidende gelyke verwantskap in 'n punt-tot-punt verhouding tussen etiese en wetenskaplike vooruitgang. En so hier is dan die GILL model wat weer eens dui, op die grondslagsfase is outomatisasie die fokus, op instruksie is kundigheid die fokus, en met leerlinge is heiligheid, of heiligheid is miskien 'n beter woord hier, die fokus. Ons weet dus dat daar is bewys vir die prestasie, vir geautomatiseerde prestasie, daar is bewys vir gereflekteerde oplossingsvaardighede, maar hier is dit nie 'n kwessie van bewys nie, maar 'n kwessie van getuienis, tot 'n substantieve getuienis, het ek nou hier gebruik, van 'n verbintenis tot gekontekstualiseerde oordeel en beginsels van naaste liefde en geregtigheid. En dan met leierskap, selfverwesenliking en skepend, is die 2 kernwoorde wat ek hier byvoeg. So, laat ons gou dan aanskuif. Hierdie het ons nou pas reeds bespreek, en dus kan ek redelik vinnig daardeur beweeg, en dan kom ons weer eens by die finale model van die GILL model, en dit is leierskap, selfverwesenliking en skepend. En so, ek wil graag hoor wat u hiervan dink, en nou gaan ek deur wat baie leergere deur die eeue heen gesê het oor wat onderwys is, om dan te sien hoe dit verwys na die model self. So mense, ek sal baie graag van u wil hoor wat u omtrent dink, of u vir my enige leidrade het tot beter woordeskat in hierdie wat ek hier kan gebruik. Dankie.